Formula One on 5 Live.
And welcome to Japan and welcome to Suzuka Circuit, where it is a little muggy. It's rather hot, 29 degrees, but we have an overcast afternoon here in Suzuka, and we're getting ready for the first practice session of the weekend ahead of the Japanese Grand Prix on Sunday afternoon. My name's Rosanna Tennant and I'm down in the paddock and pit lane, and as I look out from the paddock I can already see the grandstand starting to fill up with the passionate Japanese crowd. They've been here already for a couple of days, sporting the famous DRS hats that they craft at home and bring to the circuit. And as I stand here looking at the Red Bull hospitality area, the fans are queuing up to see Max Verstappen make his way across to the garage. They've already stopped their team principal, Christian Horner, for autographs and handing over presents and photographs. They really embrace Formula One here in Japan, and of course they should. We've been racing here at Suzuka since 1987, the circuit built back in 1962. So much history around this iconic track, and of course figure of 8, lucky in Japanese culture. Could it be lucky for Red Bull this weekend? They could take the Constructors' Championship. They need to outscore Mercedes by a point. Will they be able to do that this weekend after a very difficult weekend in Singapore last time out, just a few days ago, and we're already racing again? And it's great to be joined by our lead commentator Harry Benjamin, Neon McLaren Formula E driver Sam Bird, and BBC Sports chief F1 writer Andrew Benson. Guys, it's great to be in Japan. We've had an adventure getting here, as you might expect, but it's well worth it, isn't it? Such a great trip to make, to come and see racing around this iconic track. And Harry, I'm sure from your vantage point in the commentary box, you can see the stands filling up on the start-finish straight.
You know what? This is probably one of the best views I've ever had from a commentary box. This is my first time here in Suzuka, and we have got a view of literally the entire pit lane. We are opposite Aston Martin and Alfa Romeo, who are directly opposite us, but we're at a high vantage point right at the top of the main grandstand that runs along the start-finish straight. We can see the grid boxes freshly painted for this weekend, and it absolutely is filling up. Everybody is in their gear as well. We've got, as will come as no surprise, lots of AlphaTauri hats and wear, lots of Honda, Red Bull and Yuki Tsunoda merchandise filling up. But I'm really looking forward to this one. The drivers all love it, and I'm starting to get a feel why people love coming to Suzuka so much. It is a little bit of a mission to get to, but as you said, well worth it.
It's made it all part of the fun, hasn't it? And talking of drivers, you're lucky to be sitting next to Formula E driver Sam Bird. This is such a great track, but the challenges, wow, they come thick and fast around this space. Which area of the track are you going to be looking out for, and where might drivers struggle this weekend?
Oh my God, firstly, hey Rosanna, I hope the pit lane is treating you very nicely.
Always.
This track is incredible. Every driver that you speak to buzzes about coming here and really enjoys the challenge that is Suzuka Circuit. I mean, where do you start? First turn, which is now going to be the Sebastian Vettel B corner for this weekend.
Buzzing
corner. You've got the high-speed S's just constantly changing direction. Steering wheel's never really in a straight line. You've got 130R spoon curve. There's so many iconic corners at this racetrack. I don't think you can just pick one. It's just brilliant, isn't it? It's a throwback kind of circuit. If you go off, it bites. High speed, difficult, but everybody loves it.
Super old school. And Andrew Benson, I know you like coming here. We had supper together last night. It's wonderful to enjoy the culture, but the racing culture here is phenomenal. We've got fans supporting different drivers up and down the grid, but of course this weekend the focus is, well, actually I'm going to sort of question myself on this. Is the focus on Red Bull taking the Constructors' Championship, or is the focus now on Ferrari, who perhaps are going to end this incredible strong and dominant run that we've seen from Max Verstappen and Red Bull? Can Red Bull make a response this weekend to what they did in Singapore, and is it Ferrari who are actually going to be one of the strongest teams this weekend?
Well, Rosanna, they've already ended that winning run in Singapore last weekend with a brilliant drive by Carlos Sainz. Actually, though, it might be counterintuitive, but it's McLaren that people think might be the closest challenger to Red Bull this weekend. They were very quick in the high-speed corners at Silverstone and Spa, and this place is full of them. I'm going to shout out the Degner 1, by the way, Sam, as an absolutely fantastic corner, which is kind of overlooked, but if you go and watch there, it's super quick, and often the Degners are one of the two corners where people come to grief here. Every corner is amazing, frankly. So keep an eye on McLaren. There's also a lot of intrigue up and down the pit lane. Red Bull was so bad in Singapore compared to where they've been all year, and it aligned with what they call a technical directive from the FIA about flexible floors particularly, but also flexible bodywork. And the teams were going, I wonder if there's something in this. So up and down the pit lane, people are going, if Red Bull aren't people would expect Red Bull to dominate here at Suzuka. It could have been made for their car. So if they don't, there's going to be a lot of raised eyebrows up and down the pit lane.
Definitely a circuit that should suit them, the long, high-speed corners, and the cars are already out tackling them. So I'm going to hand it up to you, Harry, in the commentary box, and I get out of that pit lane.
Thank you very much, Rosanna. Yes, well, with slightly overcast skies, the mountainous regions in the background here at the Suzuka International Racing Course ahead of the 16th race of this 2023 Formula One Season 3 Practice 1. The first bit of track action underway, and for those who wish to do a little bit of a sync up, it's 58 minutes and 46, 45, 44 seconds on the clock, and straight out first away was Max Verstappen in the Red Bull along with Alex Albon in the Williams, and in fact pretty much everybody heading out there now, just waiting for Pierre Gasly in the Alpine and Fernando Alonso in the Aston Martin to join the 18 drivers already out on track on this spectacular 18 turn, 10 to the right, 8 to the left corner track, just over 5.8 kilometres, 3.6 mile figure of 8 circuit, the only figure of 8 circuit on the grid. Bit of housekeeping to clear up first of all. Let's just bring you up to speed with how the points lie. Max Verstappen, that winning streak coming to an end in Singapore, but he is still very much going to claim the championship. It's just a matter of when. It looks like it's going to be next time out in Qatar, but for now he has 374 points. He's 151 ahead of Sergio Perez. Lewis Hamilton is in a great battle for third in the standings with 180 points to his name, ahead of Fernando Alonso, who has 170. Carlos Sainz, Charles Leclerc, George Russell, Lando Norris, Lance Stroll and Pierre Gasly round out the top 10 in the driver standings. And over in the constructors, well, it looks like it will be just a matter of time this weekend until Red Bull claim the constructors title. 15 consecutive wins though, coming to an end as well in Singapore, but they have 597 points to their name, ahead of Mercedes, who have 289. Ferrari just 24 points now behind Mercedes in third. Aston Martin, McLaren the top 5, Alpine, Williams, Haas, Alfa Romeo and AlphaTauri claiming a few extra points last time out, courtesy of Liam Lawson in the AlphaTauri. Lawson is once again subbing back in for the injured Daniel Ricciardo in his AlphaTauri, alongside the home hero Yuki Tsunoda. And one other bit of housekeeping to clear up for you as well. Tyres, Pirelli bringing their hardest in the range, or some of their hardest in the range this weekend. But in this Friday session, teams are testing a new C2 tyre, and so been given a couple of additional sets to deal with that. So this is ahead of Pirelli wanting to try out some new homologations for next season. So we've got some test tyres in play, and we'll try and bring you up to speed with all of that as the session unfolds. But McLaren Formula E driver Sam Bird is alongside me, and Lewis Hamilton is winding up, I think, for his first proper flyer.
He is indeed. I can't see he's on the development test tyre at the moment. It seems like there's a bit of a split. Half the drivers have gone out on the test development tyre. Max Verstappen P1 at the moment, early days of course, but he's out on the hard tyre. And then you've got Joe and Piastri, Bottas, Lando Norris all on the medium, so a little bit of a difference out there.
Yeah, so we're getting up to speed then. This is the sound of Lewis Hamilton up through the gears, coming up to Degner 1 into the right-hander. Very quickly, you've got to get on the brakes. And how quickly, I mean, this is obviously a driver's circuit, but how quickly, Sam, do the drivers start to get into the rhythm again? Does it just take a lap just to make sure, okay, yeah, I know how this circuit works, I'm right there?
This track is very much about confidence, and I think there's a couple of drivers out there that really stand out in my mind as they can get out there and the first lap they will just be on it, and that's Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton and Fernando Alonso. I'd probably say maybe Fernando is at the top of that list in terms of just being able to get to a circuit and bang straight on it. We've seen in the past Max Verstappen doing incredible things as well, especially earlier on this season and last year as well. The way that he can just get in the car and get straight on the money before anybody else. And
not just in the past, Sam. Look at the timesheets. He's done a 33.719 for his first lap. Sergio Perez's teammate, 35.631. 2 seconds on his first lap.
He's able to get to the limit on his very first lap. And other drivers take a bit of time to build up to it, but he's able just to be on the money right from the first lap.
Who one of you at dinner last night was saying this about Fernando Alonso as well?
It was Mr. Benson.
Sorry, of course it was Andrew Benson.
I've completely stolen his wise words.
I got full of the green stuff from the McLaren. How do you call it?
It's Flovis, yeah.
Yeah, the Flovis. I'm full of it.
That's Carlos Sainz on the radio there. Is coming out of the pit lane, and even the onboard camera is covered in a little bit of green Flovis paint that's been sprayed off the back of the McLaren in front.
And also interesting, there'll be Flovis, I would have thought, on Carlos Sainz's teammate's car, Charles Leclerc, because he's got a new floor which they're testing this session. It's only on Leclerc's car for this session. They've got enough for Sainz if it proves to be effective. McLaren, of course, they've got the Singapore upgrade that Norris had on his car, but they've got it on both cars, plus another couple of small extra parts for this weekend as well.
Free Flovis paint on the Ferrari. Maybe they could take some pictures and see how the air flows over their car in disturbed air.
And on that point you were making about Fernando Alonso, Sam Bird, look who's second behind Max Verstappen.
Yeah, there we go.
First laps, it's Fernando Alonso. Okay, it's 1.3 seconds behind, but he is still faster than everybody else. And I suspect the Aston Martin won't be the second fastest car over the course of this weekend. And I was speaking to one of the Aston Martin engineers yesterday in the paddock, and that's what we were talking about at dinner last night. I was asking why Singapore hadn't been as good as they'd hoped for, but also why it looked good at some points during the weekend and less good during qualifying. And he said, well, Fernando just gets straight to the limit. It's remarkable, and he finds that faster than pretty much any driver. And we see the evidence of that in qualifying, he was saying, and it's a pattern actually. If you watch Fernando Alonso over the last few years, he's often quicker in Q1 relative to the field than he is by the time he gets to Q3. And it's not that he's not failed to find the limit in Q3, it's just that he's found the absolute limit earlier than everyone else, so he has less to find through qualifying.
Well, with 52 minutes and 13 seconds of free practice one remaining. The lap times so far are indeed Max Verstappen, who has just gone faster on that high compound of tyre, a 1:33.354 ahead of Fernando Alonso on that development tyre, 1:35. Piastri is third, Leclerc, Russell, Hülkenberg, Perez, Ocon, Sainz, Bottas the top 10.
But this is going to be quite interesting now. Both McLarens have just done a cool down, and now they're pushing on a medium compound tyre. These 2 laps from Lando and Oscar Piastri might give us an indication of how competitive McLaren are going to be this weekend. Like, where's their car at? This is the first proper push lap. Let's see what they can get up to in P1.
The McLaren Formula driver sat third alongside myself.
I don't know why that's funny. I don't know why it's funny. It's not like I'm sat here as a fanboy in McLaren gear in the box.
I have to say, you are breaching BBC impartiality guidelines at the moment. I'll have to hold them on myself.
I'm an employee of somewhere, and I was cold and therefore put on a jumper. It just so happens that it's papaya based. It's not.
Yeah. The aircon is rather chilly in the commentary.
And if anyone's confused about him being referred to as McLaren Formula E driver, it's because he's moved teams in the closed season.
Yep, and get it right, Mr. Benson. It's Neom McLaren.
I'm not allowed to mention sponsors.
I think we're getting
we got BBC guidelines issues here again, Sam Bird. So just watch yourself.
Rosanna Tennant, get us out of this tricky.
It's the name of the team
we found ourselves in. Down to you in the pit lane.
If only I was sponsored. I wish I might be wearing something nicer in the pit lane. I'm just watching Lance Stroll still sitting in the garage. He's been out for a couple of runs, but he's just sitting now, waiting. Mechanics making a few little tweaks to the rear of the car, a few little adjustments at the front. Of course, missed the last time out in Singapore after that heavy crash qualifying. We're told that the car was built, but Lance didn't feel ready to get in the car. Obviously, it's super important a driver feels ready and at the peak of mobility. So hopefully he's back to himself and ready to, can we say, match Fernando Alonso? Might that be a possibility this weekend? But at the moment, sitting in the garage, and it's great looking out at the start-finish straight. A soup here in the pit lane, so I'm going to get my steps in. And even my floors, I think, today. How many floors you'll be able to climb going up and down this lane?
Well, there's about 3 just to get to the commentary box, I think. So that'll be one mission as well. Pretty much everybody out there, bar Sergio Perez in the Red Bull, Alex Albon in the Williams, as you say, Lance Stroll and that Aston Martin, and Yuki Tsunoda in the AlphaTauri. Only been out, done one lap on that development tyre, and then come in as the Aston Martin of Fernando Alonso and Carlos Sainz, or Charles Leclerc, I should say, in that Ferrari, coming very close into the hairpin and just trying to find themselves a bit of track time. This is the sound of Logan Sargent, the American rookie in the Williams, coming through Degner on the exits and just sliding that Williams through the rear. Sargent out on that development tyre. I wanted to talk about pressure. We'll come to Logan in a minute, but Yuki Tsunoda racing on home soil. What does that bring, Sam? Does that bring a good pressure or a bad pressure?
I think it brings a good pressure. Depends on how he handles it as well and how he sees it. Everybody's very different under pressure. Some people, it might break them. Some people, they might thrive under pressure. So I hope he has a good weekend here. It's his first home race with fans. So it'll be good to see as we see George Russell winding up towards turn 13, 14, spoon curve, just down one gear, back on the power, small little brake. These cars kind of auto brake when you lift off the throttle anyway, with the amount of downforce that they've got. It's like hitting a brick wall anyway, climbing up towards 300 kilometers an hour. Now going through 130R. Let's see if it's flat out. Already flat out. It's not even a corner these days in these modern Formula One cars, and then it's hard on the brake, down 4 gears and through the chicane. Make sure you get a good exit. What's George Russell going to be getting up to? From 11th, he moves up to 5th, 1.1 seconds off the pace.
And of course, it's a bit of a crucial weekend for George Russell as well. After we all talked about it so much, the crash in the final lap, chasing down Lando Norris and Carlos Sainz to maybe try and get that win in Singapore. Hit the wall into the left-hander of turn 10 in Singapore, found the wall, and even in the post-race press conferences, Andrew, he was close to tears, wasn't he? He's got to bounce back this weekend.
Well, he said it took him, yesterday we asked him about this, he said it took him sort of 24 to 36 hours to get over it. We've got Max Verstappen back on track on the test tyre at the moment. And it was interesting, I asked him, I thought it was fascinating that on that last lap, Lando Norris, who he was trying to pass for second place, brushed the wall at that corner, and right behind him, Russell then hit the wall and broke his suspension. And I thought, I wonder how much the fact that Norris, he's literally following that car for like 5 or 6 laps, whatever it was, and in its wheel tracks, I wondered how much that might have influenced Russell in terms of what he was, car positioning and what have you. And he says, look, I don't want to make any excuses. It was my mistake. But I'll read it out to you, and Sam, it'd be interesting to hear what you say about it. He says, when Lando hit the wall, I feel like the process is so quick in your brain, because I saw him hit the wall, and in that millisecond I thought, oh my God, he's hit the wall, and then I hit it. I think when you're so close to a car, you're sort of following their wheel tracks, we're not looking left and right, the walls are in your peripheral vision, and for sure either the distraction of him clipping the wall was a factor, or I was following the wheel tracks and just hit it more, or it was just a silly mistake. But it seems too much of a coincidence that every single lap I did all weekend, I didn't touch it once, and I touched it 0.2 seconds after he did.
I think when you're so close behind somebody as well, I think that was probably the closest it's been as Max Verstappen goes another 7/10 faster than his previous best, and now moves 1.6 seconds clear of everybody.
Usual service resumed.
Yeah, there we go. I think when you're following so close to another car, Andrew, it's like you lose visibility. Now, if he's that close to the back of Lando, and Lando's hit the wall, and he's positioned 1 centimetre to the right of Lando's
Yes,
car.
that's because I said, I wonder if you were trying to get a better exit or something.
No, it wouldn't have even been consciously thinking about a better exit, because the next corner wasn't an overtaking zone. It would have just been that was his car positioning. Maybe he'd been 1 centimetre wider than Lando all race at that corner and closer to the wall. Just so happened Lando that lap was 1 centimetre closer to the wall than what he'd been previously. And it's a massive shame. When you say, though, Harry, that he needs a good weekend, because as if he's like under pressure, I don't think he is under any pressure at all. Mercedes love him. He's got a contract there. He's not fighting really for anything in particular in this year's World Championship. You know, he's 70 points behind, roughly 70 points behind.
What about
Lewis.
Internally, though?
Yeah, internally he will want to do better, but to say he's under pressure, no, he might put himself under pressure as a racing driver, but I don't think he's necessarily under pressure from the powers that be at Mercedes to go out there and get those points back that he missed out on in Singapore.
So you're saying George Russell isn't fighting for his future in Formula One contracts?
No,
under pressure.
no, he's just fine. I think he's established.
This is the sound of Max Verstappen just watching a replay as he comes through the S's. A little bit of traffic. Let's hear from him.
That Mercedes was so dangerously in the way there.
It's really interesting watching Verstappen and Alonso at the moment, because Verstappen's on the new C2 test tyre and Alonso's on the C2, the standard one for this year, and they're kind of doing what you would expect of each of them. So Alonso's just on a lap, he's half a second behind Verstappen, which is probably where his car is. They're the only two who are at that level at the moment in this first part of the session.
It is really, it's fantastic to see actually just how quickly they can get on the pace. It is Verstappen with a 1:32.5 who currently leads ahead of Alonso, Perez, Piastri, Norris the top 5, Russell, Leclerc, Sainz, Hamilton, Bottas the top 10, Hülkenberg, Zhou, Lawson, Ocon, Magnussen at the top 15. And then we have in 16th Gasly, Sargent, Albon, Stroll and Tsunoda. But I tell you what, we've got a slow car out on track, and it's Max Verstappen who is really coming almost close to a halt down that little back stretch towards 130R. There aren't any yellow flags out. There's a white flag. I don't think maybe it's an issue. No, gone away now, so he's back to normal.
I think there was a timing discrepancy.
Yeah.
They said that Max Verstappen was actually stopped, and we were all just kind of going,
suddenly, oh my god, it seems like it's
quick.
fine now, but Verstappen is currently fastest. We got a brilliant vantage point here from the commentary box, and I can spy Rosanna Tennant lurking outside of the McLaren garage.
Yeah, you can. On the slope. It's so bumpy as well, by the way. When the cars come in, they're clattering out of the fast lane into the slow lane of the pit lane. So hopefully no one gets any damage from that. But Lando Norris has been on the radio saying, guys, do I even have a front wing on? Because I've got so much understeer. So he has come back in. He is now in the McLaren garage. Obviously, everybody's saying that McLaren are going to go well this weekend. They like these fast corners. And they've just made such progress, haven't they? And, you know, talking of driver contracts and driver market, they now know that they've got Lando and Oscar Piastri. Oscar Piastri signing up until the end of 2026 now. It's a really strong driver pairing. Is it the strongest on the grid? Who do you guys think is the strongest?
I think probably I would go for Hamilton and Russell, Rosanna, but it depends. We have to see how good Oscar Piastri turns out to be. But I tell you what, yesterday Andrea Stella, the McLaren team principal, was talking about that, and he likened him in some aspects to Fernando Alonso and in some aspects to Michael Schumacher. So it sounds like he's made quite an impression at McLaren.
That's not bad. Two relatively good drivers, weren't they?
Yes, indeed. And Piastri and McLaren showing faith in each other and signing a contract. He was already going to be around for next year, actually, was Piastri. So it's an extension beyond that to the end of 2026, which is that first year of the new regulations coming into Formula One. Verstappen going even faster, 7/10 clear now, 1:32.442 on that test and development tyre that Pirelli have brought ahead of Alonso, Perez. Then comes Piastri. Russell are the top 5. I was getting a little bit worried about Yuki Tsunoda only coming out for one lap, but he is now back out of the pits. He's on the medium compounder tyre, and this is the sound of the Japanese racing driver just getting up to speed, coming through the S's now, and there are many Tsunoda fans here out in force. It's not been the best couple of races for Yuki Yuki Tsunoda. Didn't even start the Italian Grand Prix, pulling over on the formation lap. Had an incident that wasn't his fault with Sergio Perez on lap 1 of Singapore. So really hoping for good showing here is Yuki Tsunoda. Not only just to get some good results for AlphaTauri, but also after Liam Lawson, his rookie teammate, in his 3rd race weekend, subbing in for Daniel Ricciardo, well, being the top Red Bull driver, out-qualifying Verstappen and Perez, as well as Tsunoda in qualifying and finishing in the points for the first time. So there's a little bit of pressure, coming back to the P word, on Tsunoda in that respect.
The reason why we see Yuki Tsunoda not doing so many laps so far is he had the aero fencing on the rear of that car, so they were collecting data at the early stages of this free practice session. Obviously that takes a bit of time to take off. And he's complaining of a little bit of understeer at the moment, but this is his first sort of sighter lap, as it were. He'll get quicker, but it's not really troubling the front of the timing sheets as he goes 18th.
AlphaTauri brought quite a lot of upgrades last time in Singapore, and they've continued to bring a few. A new rear wing and a rear view mirror as well for AlphaTauri this weekend for Tsunoda, the 21st Japanese F1 driver. This is Logan Sargent, once again coming through the Degners, currently down in 19th for Williams, and he runs out wide on the exit, almost 4 wheels, certainly over the white line on the curb and picking up the dust, Sam.
Oh, he's looking on the edge already. That's the second kind of moment he's had through Degner 1 and then through, turn 9, Degner 2. The car looks unsettled. There's a little bump right after the apex of Degner 1, and the car, when it rebounds off that bump, it looks like it just pops up in the air a little bit too much and has a little bit of a nervous wiggle. And we've seen in the years gone by, haven't we, Andrew, that bump can catch a lot of people out. I can't remember what qualifying year it was where 3, 4, 5 drivers, there were so many red flags because that bump caught so many people out.
Yeah, it's a really, really difficult section of corners. You approach it through Dunlop, which is a kind of sort of flat out section of the end of the S's effectively. You go over a crest and you're beginning to go downhill a little bit, and there's a compression in the middle of Degner 1, isn't there, Sam? And which is a really, really quick corner. But then almost before you're out of it, you have to be braking for Degner 2, which is quite slow, and Logan Sargent nearly had the classic Degner 2 accident there, where you carry too much speed into the apex and wash out wide. Heikki Kovalainen and the McLaren back in 2009 or 8, I think, was
Danny
one of the
Kvyat
people who crashed there. Well, that was the hairpin. He rolled
coming into the hairpin, wasn't it? Yeah.
It's probably the most of the track that's the most demanding on the calendar. I would argue that Degner 1 and 2 is possibly the most demanding section of corners, even though everybody talks about the S's as being the sort of iconic defining challenge of Suzuka.
You've got to get your turning point to Degner 1 absolutely perfect, but it's very easy as a driver to try and be, let's call it, safe and turn in early. But turning in early, what does that do? Well, what it does is it means that you're then putting more load into the car after the apex point. So then you're having to do more turning later on in the corner, and that's not what you want to be doing at this corner. Corners like the S-curves, where you're constantly turning, you can get away with it. Is it the right thing to do? No. But you can turn in early if you want to. Degner 1, you can't get away with that.
No. Well, just over half an hour of this session remain. Carlos Sainz to the Ferrari. His second career Formula One win taken last time out in Singapore, ending Max Verstappen's run, and he's just being wheeled back into the garage, I believe, Rosanna.
He is, and I'm watching him, Harry, on those development tyres. He's just being pushed back in by the mechanics. His teammate Charles Leclerc already in the Ferrari garage. And Charles Leclerc, one of the drivers, already complaining about traffic. We've heard a few drivers already on the radio getting a bit close for comfort. And I don't know about you guys, but I was surprised when Ferrari said that it would be Charles Leclerc with the upgrade this weekend and Carlos running the old spec. Because we spoke on the Checkered Flag podcast preview for the weekend that is there a sort of power shift going on at Ferrari? Is Carlos Sainz now the stronger driver and they need to maybe focus on him? And then I just thought, well, Carlos, he's won last time out. Shouldn't he get the upgrade? But it's interesting. How do they make that choice, Andrew?
Well, Rosanna, it's only for this session. They've got 2 floors, but this session they want to do a back-to-back. So it doesn't really matter which car has the new floor and which car doesn't. And actually, there's only like a hundredth between them at the moment. Not that that's necessarily defining of the performance of the floor. So this is purely, think of this session only as a test session. So I don't think you can read anything into that in terms of the power dynamics within the team. Also, you're absolutely right. Sainz is on a bit of a roll at the moment. Lots of things influence these things, and one of them is that the car's a difficult car. Leclerc's been talking about this recently, and it's nervous, basically. It's unstable and it's unpredictable. And one of the things, Sam, they've done to try and help the drivers out with that is to dial a bit of understeer in. And Leclerc hates understeer. That's the sort of where the front has less grip than the back. And he says he's finding it hard to drive around that because his natural style is to drive with oversteer. Yeah. And if you drive this car with oversteer, you're going to crash, which is what was happening earlier in the season.
I think it's the right thing to do. I think giving Charles Leclerc the option, look, you're not happy with the car right now. You've publicly come out and said that, right, we're going to give you this, try this, see if this helps you. Whereas you've got the other driver, Carlos Sainz, going, right, I'm happy right now, I'm delivering, so why not give Charles Leclerc the opportunity to try it first? I don't think it's a case of number one driver versus number two, or they prefer Charles to Carlos. I think that they're giving it to Charles as like a, look, you're not happy right now with the car, let's try and give you this first, and that's all it is.
Well, George Russell just having a little bit of a moment there, coming up through the S's, nearly got me off my seat, but managed to carry that through. The rear wing slightly sliding out for him. He's now coming through the hairpin though and puts his foot to the floor, up through the gears. He's currently in fifth, personal best through the first sector, and then coming rapidly towards Spoon Curve. Now, I don't know if this is true, but that run between Spoon Curve to 130R, Sam Collins, who is the F1 TV technical expert, who spent a lot of time in Japan, I believe he lived here for a long time, covered the Super Formula Championship, which is basically as close as you can get to Formula 1 in Japan, the championship Liam Lawson's racing. He says that is called the West Stretch. So I've asked him, why is it called the West Stretch? And he says, because it is.
Well, it'll be because it's the west part of the circuit.
Well, that's what I thought, but I kind of alluded, is it because it's west? But he didn't really back that up, so I'm rolling with it.
I think it is. If you think about it, the sea's just down there. You can see it out of the window. And the mountains are over there, and we're on the east side of Japan, so that is the west.
We're on Radio Benson, so over there is...
over there to our left, you can see the sea. There are mountains in front of us. We are facing west towards the mountains, and that is where that stretch is. I have to say, so what? Frankly,
well, it's just I'm just covering up. If I say West Stretch, and then I get some weird looks in the commentary box.
I don't think I wouldn't say that of all the places on Suzuka, the name West Stretch is one of those ones that resonates.
To me, it did. Just seeing a few replay shots of things that have happened in the last couple of moments, and Yuki Tsunoda cutting across and taking the racing line, coming into turn one with buzzing corner on the inside. He came across the Mercedes of Lewis Hamilton, but they lived to fight another day on that occasion. Even the two Mercedes, I think, also coming quite close together. And we already had Verstappen on the radio complaining about the Mercedes being right on the inside. He was coming up through the S's. But the thing is, where else can he go? Because I think he was coming up through the first S, and so turn 3, Verstappen was on the racing line, and the Mercedes was sort of tucked right on the right-hand side. But where else can you go?
I think it's a load of... It didn't really matter. Lewis was coming out the pits on brand new mediums, so I don't know why Lewis was complaining at that point. We see Pierre Gasly moving up to P7. Also, this looks to be a pretty decent lap from Liam Lawson. He's actually gone purple in 2 of the mini sectors in sector 2. So Liam Lawson looking pretty strong at the moment. 1.2 seconds off after the second sector compared to Max Verstappen. But remember, Liam Lawson's in an AlphaTauri and a rookie. So this looks to be a reasonable lap.
Yeah, just had a little snap on the steering wheel though. He came into the final corner as he crossed the line. Goes 8th fastest for Lawson, and that was a 1:33.931. And the crowd are out in force for Liam Lawson as well, because, as I mentioned, he is racing predominantly in Japan this year in that Super Formula Championship, and does have some the most recent experience of Suzuka than any other driver on the grid. He's raced here already once this year, done some pre-season testing there as well as part of that Super Formula Championship. So Lawson might well have the edge over his teammate, who's actually from the country this year.
I think Liam Lawson's been impressing a lot of people since he got into that AlphaTauri on the Saturday morning after Daniel Ricciardo's crash in Zandvoort. He's taken to it like a duck to water. Apologies for the cliche. But I'm hearing on the grapevine that they're going to announce Yuki Tsunoda for next year sometime this weekend, which kind of makes sense if they're going to keep him because it's Japan, this is home race. But also that they're not announcing the second driver, but the word again is it's going to be Ricciardo again. And you have to wonder what Liam Lawson's got to do.
He's actually third choice, really, because at the start of this year, it really should have been Lawson and Tsunoda.
Yeah, they took De Vries for a reason I'd never really understood in the first place, but they did. And now, I mean, Liam Lawson must be thinking, crikey, how am I going to get a Formula One seat after this? But anyway, we'll see what happens. But he's definitely impressed in these last 4 races. No question about that.
Well, what do you make of it, Sam? I mean, we had a similar discussion on the Checkered Flag podcast previewing the weekend, which you can also go and check out. But at the end of the day, there's 2 seats up for grabs. 3 doesn't go into 2. You've got Tsunoda, who looks like he will stay around for another year. Daniel Ricciardo had 2 races coming back in for Nick De Vries. Didn't set the world alight, but we were like, okay, he's had a couple to get into it, let's see what he's got. And then, of course, he breaks his metacarpal bone in his hand in Zandvoort and it's out. Then Liam Lawson gets the call up and pretty much impresses straight away, most of all in Singapore last time out, getting into the top 10 in qualifying and picking up 2 points. Are there any other options? Could Red Bull, we know they like to look after drivers, could they plant him in a Williams?
I think, yeah, they could do. They could do, but from my understanding...
That's a rumour I've heard, by the way, as well, yeah, because Logan Sargent, sorry to interrupt, Sam, is looking a bit shaky there at the moment.
Oh, okay. I'd heard that he was safe for 1 more year, is the rumour that I'd heard.
I don't know, I'm just... Okay. Rumours are rumours.
The rumour on one end of the pit lane is that, and on the other...
Yeah, but you never know, this is Formula One. The problem with Formula One is that there's too many good drivers and not enough seats. That's the issue that we've got currently. Does Liam Lawson deserve a full-time shot in Formula One? Absolutely. As Sergio Perez on the soft compound tyre pops up to second, still 0.6 of a second behind Max Verstappen, who is winding up to do his push lap on the soft tyre. So expect Max to go a chunk clear of his teammate. But going back to Liam Lawson, yes, he deserves a seat. Where? Well, it doesn't look like it's going to be AlphaTauri, so we've got to think of other places where he could go. The only option right now is Williams, but we will find out very soon, won't we?
But Sam, as a racing driver, don't you just want to crack on with your career? So does Liam actually need to be bold and go elsewhere, out of the F1 paddock? Or does he wait, cool his jets, just keep on coming to race weekends and hope he gets another opportunity? What would you do?
I mean, right now he's just enjoying and loving the experience of being a fully fledged Formula One racing driver. And just by doing that, by enjoying his racing, he's putting himself in the shop window for next season. Everybody's speaking about him. Everybody's optimistic about his future. So I don't think he needs to go elsewhere, actively go and race anything else. Even if he were to sit on the sidelines for part of next year, I still think that he will be at some point racing in Formula One next year, even if he were to start the season as a reserve driver.
Do you think... sorry, we're going to interrupt that because coming through the Degnews, Max Verstappen, as you said, Sam, was winding up for a lap, and now he's very much wound up.
He's already 0.55 of a second up on his best lap time, although his turn 11 at the hairpin looked a little bit scrappy, particularly the exit, a little bit too much of a rear wheel flare that allowed a bit too much external tyre temp. I don't think it'll hurt him too much. He'll still go quicker in sector 2, but it shows that there's still lap time in there, which is worrying for everybody else.
Yeah, as he passes his teammate, heads down the west stretch towards 130 yard, a flat-out left-hander, and nearly 8/10 up on himself in that middle sector. He has stuck on the soft compound tyre, the red-walled tyre, the fastest rubber Pirelli are bringing this weekend, come through the Casio Triangle. out of 17 through the slight right-hand kink of 18 and across the line for Max Verstappen. And he actually lost a little bit of time in that final sector. He's still faster overall, though, by almost 8 tenths up on himself. A 1:31.647 ahead of Sergio Perez by 1.3 seconds.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't need to, Max Verstappen, but it looks like he's trying to send a message, doesn't it? This is an awe-inspiring performance so far. And I know it's only first practice, we shouldn't get carried away, but
it's ominous, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, it really is.
We now go, Singapore was a one-off, we're back to usual service.
It certainly seems that way, especially with Ferrari. Okay, Ferrari. This is interesting now, guys. Charles Leclerc of Ferrari and Carlos Sainz are about to do their soft tyre run. So the next 90 seconds will tell us quite a lot about where the weekend's going to be.
Yeah, well, winding up first of all will be Charles Leclerc, who heads down the main straight now, screams past us in the commentary box, and DRS flap open, the rear wing slot open along the main straight, and then it slams shut under braking as he makes his way into turn one and the long loop, and it's pretty much then barely touching the brake, Sam. You're sort of easing on and off the throttle as he comes through the S's.
Yeah, as we see Carlos Sainz actually putting in a couple of purples in sector one. So it does look like the Ferrari is still maybe the best of the rest. Dare I say, although Charles Leclerc 7 tenths down after sector one, maybe I'll just completely retract my comment. Carlos Sainz 3 tenths off Max Verstappen. But what Andrew Benson said a couple of minutes ago about sending a message, this Max Verstappen's gone out there, gone, right, you guys think that you're matching us? No, I'm going to show you what I'm going to really show you what I can do this weekend. And that's some serious lap time that Verstappen's put out there as Charles Leclerc exits Spoon Curve towards the end of sector 2. What's his sector 2 time going to be like compared to Max Verstappen? It is 8 tenths of a second down.
He's had a slightly better middle sector compared to his first sector, Charles Leclerc. You managed to get a little bit of a toe actually down towards 130R, but he's coming into the final corner now, and the rear just slightly slides, but foot to the floor and across the line for Charles Leclerc, second fastest, a 132.6. What has Sainz got? He goes quicker on a 132.2. He's 6 tenths off Max Verstappen. Leclerc a second, and worth remembering that Leclerc is trialling out a new floor and Carlos Sainz is not.
So that the 8 tenths that you mentioned in the second sector, Sam, that was added. That was the sort of accumulation time from the first sector, and he was already 7 tenths down in the first sector. So he actually only lost the 1 tenth in the middle sector. So he must have done something wrong in the first sector, surely.
Well,
I think. Or the car's not very good.
I actually think that Max Verstappen's lap was pretty weak for him.
Oh, of course, yeah.
For him, in Sector 2 and Sector 3, I mentioned that I felt like he got turn 11, the hairpin, slightly wrong, went too wide, did more meters than he needed to, and then had a wheel flare, a wheel spin moment coming out of that corner. So I actually think that, worryingly for everybody else, Max Verstappen can improve in Sector 2 and Sector 3, whereas I think his Sector 1 was flying.
22 minutes and 34, 33 seconds remain of this free practice 1 session. Max Verstappen is currently fastest with a 1:31.647, 6 tenths clear of the first of the Ferraris. Carlos Sainz, then comes Charles Leclerc, Sergio Perez, Fernando Alonso, the top 5. Nico Hülkenberg is 6th ahead of Russell, Norris, Hamilton and Stroll, the top 10. Bottas, Gasly, Lawson, Magnussen and Ocon, the top 15. Piastri, Sargent, Tsunoda, Zhou and Albon, the 20 drivers that make up this grid. With a mixture of tyres, we're starting to see some soft compound runs now. We've just seen Verstappen and the 2 Ferraris give their soft compound running a go. We also have a test and development tyre being trialled in these free practice sessions this weekend for Pirelli. They are looking at a new C2 compound to homologate that ahead of next year, so giving the teams that to test, and that means they all get actually a couple of extra additional sets on top of what they normally do. Normally 13, so they're given a couple of extra more. And drivers are starting to push the limit, Sam, including Lewis Hamilton coming out of the second Degner and just kicks up the dust. Logan Sargent did that not too long ago, but he was 4 wheels off the road. Lewis Hamilton pretty much central over the red and white bumps, but
that's no good dust floor. That's not dust. That's actually the wooden part of the floor. So in the middle of the floor, you've got a thing called the plank. That plank protects the chassis that it sits underneath, basically. So it gives a little bit of protection. The cars are only allowed to run that plank to a certain thickness during the race or during qualifying. They need to still be a certain thickness at the end of sessions, but Lewis Hamilton certainly made it a little bit thinner in one particular area underneath his car, and the mechanics will be probably changing that plank in between the sessions.
This is the sound of the Aston Martin of, I think it's Lance Stroll, isn't it? No, it's Fernando Alonso. It is coming through the S's, and while he sits on his soft compound lap, Rosanna, I believe, is outside Aston Martin.
Yeah, I am just watching on as Lance Stroll continues to sit in the garage, and one of the engineers has just come running off the pit wall, had a chat with Lance, actually sort of bending over the cockpit, which you kind of think, oh, wouldn't you just do that via team radio? Then he came running around and bashed the guy with the front jack and had a word with the guys on the engineering station in the middle of the garage. He's run back to the pit wall, and still Lance is sitting here in the garage. You'd have thought that might have sorted out whatever problems he's having. So I'm going to investigate and see if there's something more sinister afoot.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Get the investigating going. I've got the magnifying glass as well, Rosanna. Alonso continues on his lap, coming into Spoon curve now, almost like a double left-hander, harassing that steering wheel before he gets onto the straight towards 130R. Hearing that Lance Stroll is now leaving the pits in his car, so joining his teammate out on track, as Alonso 7/10 off at the moment from Verstappen in the middle sector. Down through the gears into the Casio Triangle radio from Lawson.
Very light rain on my visor.
And well, are we going to get a visit from some weather as this FP1 session has only 19 minutes remaining? We shall see. But Alonso crosses the line, and it's third fastest, a second off of Max Verstappen. What did you make of that lap?
What did I make of that lap?
Your expert analysis, Sam Burt.
I think that I don't think the balance is quite there for Fernando. Watching that lap, it looked in some areas like the rear was a little bit tricky towards the end of braking, and then it's as if the brake bias was then pushed forwards, and then you'd have a little bit of a push mid-corner. It looked in the longer radius corners like he had a little bit of understeer that would then bite him, then be a little bit of oversteer on exits. So I think there's a little bit of work to do there for Aston Martin.
And Fernando Alonso loves this track as well. Big into samurai culture, reading books on it and the Japanese culture from when he was 13, 14 years old. And Aston Martin releasing a press release ahead of this weekend all about it. And I found it really interesting that at the end, Fernando Alonso said, "I will not stop soon." So I think we've got Alonso for a few more years.
Well, I don't think he needs to.
No.
I mean,
he's in one of the primes of his career.
We were having a really fun chat actually last night over dinner, weren't we, about the potential of human beings and athletes at certain ages, and when is the peak, when do you drop off? Now the kind of common consensus has been up and down the F1 pit lane for many decades that it's better to have younger drivers, and when you get to like 38 to 40 you're dropping off, and that's simply not the case with Fernando Alonso, which opens up a whole new debate. When is a racing driver's peak, and when do you tend to tail off, and can you continue in F1 deeper into your 40s?
It's certainly interesting to look at Fernando's career over the years, isn't it? And especially at a track like this, where he's had such highs as well. A two-time Suzuka winner, but also not that long ago, he was in a McLaren with a Honda engine, calling it a GP2 engine as well, making his way down into Turn 1, and he got a lot for that. Of course, if he's going to stick around a bit longer at Aston Martin, they are going to be powered by Honda from 2026. So that might make for a bit of a sticky situation, bit of backtracking on that.
I think it'll be water under the bridge if he can keep on performing and getting podiums. Fernando operates at a high level, whatever you'll give him, and he'll extract the maximum. There were some brilliant drives in that McLaren when it should not have been scoring points. He was swashbuckling his way up to P6 in some places. It was great to watch, wasn't it? But you give him a car that's competitive, as we've seen throughout the early phase of this season. Boy, is it exciting, isn't it? He'll take it to Max and Lewis, and he wants to fight at the front still.
I'm going to go there. What do you do about Lance Stroll then? And he's on a lap at the moment, is out of the pit lane. He's currently 11th fastest. Had a disaster at Singapore with that huge crash in qualifying. Didn't take part in the race. Good to see him back. And Lance is a decent peddler. You don't get a pole position and a couple of podiums for no good reason. But up against Fernando Alonso, it was always going to be a tough ask. But the points tell a story. And just looking at numbers, Fernando Alonso sits in 4th with 170 to his name. Lance Stroll sits in 9th with 47.
Yeah, but look, Lance Stroll is
obviously the massive caveat. His dad runs the team.
Yeah, but Lance Stroll is a competent Formula One driver, as we see him go up to P6. He's actually he's 3/10 off his teammate at the moment. So look, he can drive, and he can drive pretty damn well. But being up against Fernando Alonso is completely different. We've seen Fernando Alonso take teammates apart in the past. I mean, one of the best drivers that I've raced against in the championship that I do is Stoffel Van Dorn. And Stoffel didn't stand a chance against Fernando in the couple of years that he was his teammate. Fernando is one of the best, the top 5 drivers probably ever historically in Formula One. He sits in that bracket. He's that good and has been for a long period of time. So for Lance to come up against that as his teammate is very difficult. It doesn't matter whether your dad runs the team or not, you're not going to be able to compete with that.
Well, and that seat is pretty much nailed on for Lance Stroll. At the end of the day, it will be his decision as to whenever he calls it a day. And I can't see that happening as long as he's happy. But I suppose he's not going to like being trounced all the time.
No, and it depends on what dad of Lance wants to do with the race team as well. I mean, of course, he's bought that ultimately to see his son try and succeed in the sport that he loves. However, as well, it is a business, and he wants that team to succeed and do better in the team's championship. That's how you make money. And is there at any point the discussion where he goes, look, we need another driver in the seat that Lance currently occupies? I can't see it happening, but let's see.
We did do our driver picks, didn't we?
We did our driver picks. We did our driver picks.
Where there were anything goes.
But that doesn't mean that it was realistic. So I said that I would like to see the man on our screen right now, Liam Lawson, if he can't get a seat in AlphaTauri, would someone like Aston Martin go, do you know what? Go alongside Fernando, let's see what you can do. I mean, wouldn't it be great if we lived in a world where that could happen? It's not going to happen.
You can get out of your make-believe fantasy world now. Lawson is making his way in that AlphaTauri. He's on the soft compound tyre, down at 15th at the moment, and not really on a massively fast lap. He's ramping up for a lap. Or is he just coming to the end of one? Let's see what he's got round the final corner, and he comes across the line in 6th. Though he did find time on the screen. It looked like he lost a little time.
Really good looking lap. Really good. I mean, it wasn't his fastest final sector, but he was using every inch of the circuit in the right places and not using it in others. 130R, he barely used any track on the outside because there's no point. All you're doing is adding extra meters to the length of the circuit, more meters to the circuit, longer lap time.
Yeah, and in finishing off our Aston chat, Stroll is in 8th. He's just come out of the pit lane, actually, and Alonso up in 4th, who is in the pits. Verstappen, fastest, 1:31.6 ahead of Sainz. Leclerc, Alonso, Norris, the top 5. Albon, Lawson now up into 7th ahead of Stroll. Perez, Hulkenberg, the top 10. Russell, Hamilton, Piastri, Bottas, Gasly, the top 15. Magnussen, Ocon, Sargent, Tsunoda, and Zhou, 20th and last in his Alfa Romeo. And it is a really tight battle, actually. If you look at the back, Williams 21 points, 9 clear of Haas, who managed to skate a point thanks to Kevin Magnussen's brilliant drive in Singapore. They're only 2 points ahead of Alfa Romeo, who are bringing upgrades, but it's not quite clicking for them. And AlphaTauri, thanks to Liam Lawson, picked up 2 points, which now sees them only 5 points behind of Alfa Romeo. So if Haas or Alfa aren't careful, AlphaTauri, the miserable season that they've had, if they get a couple more 9th places, it's not out of the question that they might be able to lift themselves off the bottom of the constructors. So every race is crucial for those teams at the back.
It is.
It may not be the fight for the win, but for them it's
not
massive.
what we're necessarily focusing on the TV, because we're always kind of tuned in on what Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc, Fernando Alonso are doing, Lewis Hamilton, but this is so crucial for the smaller teams to get one position in the Constructors' Championship is the difference between them having budget to spend on upgrades or not for the next season. I mean, it is that vital for them. So a brilliant drive, one brilliant drive from any of those drivers can define not only their season this year, but also next year's budget and next year's race car.
Well, we're watching Kevin Magnussen at the moment making his way through the S's, and he wasn't too optimistic about Haas's chances this weekend off the back of a mega weekend in Singapore. Both cars into Q3. Kevin Magnussen is Q3 for only the second time this season, but an amazing top 6 start ahead of Fernando Alonso. Hulkenberg up there as well, and when all looked lost, it came back to Kevin Magnussen during the race, and he managed to nick a point right at the very end when Russell went into the wall. So Russell's woe was Magnussen's benefit, but at a much changed circuit here in Suzuka, they don't see too much hope. Haas do have a new concept of car coming for Austin, where they're hoping they're going to try and find a way forward for the rest of this year, but looking to 2024. But Magnussen saying this car really braking and turning, that it doesn't like it doing together.
Well, you say that. Nico Hulkenberg has had I think, a pretty strong season. I'd say that he's been the pick of those two drivers ahead of Kevin this year, especially the fact that Nico's been out of full-time F1 work for 2-3 years now. He's been a substitute on multiple occasions, but not really had anything to get his teeth sunk into on a regular occasion. And he's really taken it to Kevin Magnussen. At the moment, Hulkenberg sits in 11th place on the soft compound tyre here in first practice. I can see the Haas being okay in qualifying, but I think it'll be a difficult race, especially if it's dry. I know that they're very, very hard on their tyre, and I can see them fading quite quickly in the race. Just my opinion right now, but yeah, I think it'll be an okay Saturday, difficult Sunday for them.
Yeah, you're right, though. Hulkenberg has had the measure, especially in qualifying. 11-4 in Hulkenberg's favour. In the race, Magnussen does manage to claw it back, but Hulkenberg still leads 8-7 in the head-to-heads. But just while we're on the Haas, we did have this discussion off there as well. But I am fascinated by it. Viewing and Ving a corner. Tell me more about that, Sam Bird, because I only find it interesting because Magnussen was just going into detail a few races ago about he normally likes to, when he comes into a corner, he likes to U the corner off in his car. But he says, I have to adapt that because the car works better if I V a corner.
Yeah, it's kind of two different driving styles. There's some drivers like to brake hard, slow the car, rotate it, and then punch out of the corner in one time. That's Ving a corner. Other drivers probably brake a smidge earlier and then fire and roll the speed around the corner and then get out of the corner. That's doing a U-shaped style corner. I find that U-shaped drivers would be better at corners like what we've got here, turns 3 to turn 7, the S-curves, where it's all about minimum speed, keeping the momentum going. Corners like, well, there actually isn't probably one that suits a V-style corner here at Suzuka, or even the hairpin here. You're trying to fire a load of minimum speed around it. I'd say that maybe Lewis is an example that is probably more adapted to V-style, yet he can drive both. I'd say that Max Verstappen carries the minimum speed. So yeah, Magnussen maybe was more comfortable with a V-shape, and now he's having to adapt as well.
Yeah, well, Singapore was Magnussen's third point scoring finish of the year, but all of them have been 10th places, whereas Nico Hulkenberg, only 1 point paying position in Grand Prix, managed to nick that 7th place back in Australia with the red flag restart. So those points proving very, very crucial in the end for Haas in that fight at the back of the pack. Lewis Hamilton's just come across the line. He's on a medium compound tyre run and is currently down in 13th at the moment. So where is George Russell on the list? He's just ahead of him in 12th. He's on an outlap at the moment. Also on the medium compound tyre. So we've not seen really the full hand of Mercedes just yet. As Yuki Tsunoda, this is the sound of the Japanese driver for AlphaTauri, gets himself out of the garage and trundles down the pit lane. He's currently in 4th spot, so put in a good lap, and he's heading back out onto the track. Let's head down to Rosanna.
Well, I hate to be a spoilsport, but I'm sure I just felt a couple of spots of rain.
Well, Lawson did say he thought he felt that as well.
Yeah, there's a 3rd, 4th, 5th. Max Verstappen coming in now for a pit stop. Red Bull telling me, mind out of the way, we're going to do a pit stop. So just finessing a few things. A little bit of wheel spin there from our reigning world champion and current championship leader, and he's back out into the fray. Red Bull just making sure everything's perfect for this weekend so they can get back to doing what they do in 2023.
I think there's going to be a few more than 3 spots of rain coming your way, Rosanna, and indeed over the track. We've just seen images of the big pond lake sort of on the inside of the circuit, and that is seeing quite a few spots of rain as a few dark clouds are starting to gather over the Suzuka International Racing course, with the rain on its way with 5 minutes left of this free practice 1 session. Not enough yet to trouble the likes of Pierre Gasly, who's on the soft compound tyre in his Alpine, coming into the hairpin. And Gasly had a really good run, actually, in Singapore. He's had some good runs the last few races, actually. Managed to pick up that podium in the Netherlands as well. And it was a tale of 2 halves, really, in Singapore for Alpine, with Esteban Ocon having a great run, but then having to pull off and retire, suspected hydraulics issues, and that kind of aided Gasly in his march up through the points, and he ended up finishing 6th in what has been a bit of a trying year for Alpine, both on track and off of it.
I'd say that those 2 drivers, Esteban Ocon and Pierre Gasly, who would you say, Andrew, has had the measure of the other?
It's been reasonably close. I think Ocon on balance has probably been better, but then recently Gasly's improved, and he's had some really big highs, including, for example, Zandvoort, where he drove exceptionally well. It's a tricky one. I mean, they're a team in a funny spot, Alpine. There's even speculation that Alpine, which is basically Renault, it's their sort of sporting sub-brand which they're trying to promote around the world, might not stick around in Formula 1 for that much longer. It's been a difficult season managerially at the team. As we know, they sacked their team principal, Otmar Zafnauer, and sporting director Alan Permain. Permain have been at the team for 34 years. In Belgium in July, which caught a few people by surprise. Not Zafnauer so much, perhaps, but definitely Permain. The engine's not up to snuff at the moment. They're not investing, people say, to the level that they need to achieve what they want, which is to win. So there are some pretty significant, almost existential questions surrounding that team at the moment. People are wondering whether Renault will end up selling to Andretti, who wants to come into Formula 1 and doesn't look like he's going to be accepted in the end, even if the FIA do put him forward to F1 for consideration. I don't know. But overall, I would say the drivers are pretty evenly matched.
Yeah, I find Alpine a strange team to follow, because what is the goal? Where do they see themselves going? And the only thing I can say is that they are right now a mid-pack team that can occasionally spring a surprise and get a podium. But every year you hear these comments of we're going to get back to winning ways. The plan is to get back to winning ways.
And on a 5-year plan for about 8 years.
Yeah.
The 100 race plan is now 507 races long.
When are we going to see this? I get it's difficult, but I just find there are other teams that don't put out that press release, and they're doing a better job. Look at McLaren. Don't laugh. I don't know why you're laughing.
This is the voice of the McLaren Formula E drivers now.
The smirk is shocking. No, but I feel like they go about it in a slightly quieter way, and they're delivering better at the moment. They are.
No, you are bang on. And every time, look at where McLaren started this year, then as soon as they brought this big upgrades for Austria, for Lando, boom, massive change.
The difference in messaging has been stark. McLaren started the season, even before the season, I went to the McLaren Technology Centre, I should say, for their car launch, and the first thing they said was, we're going to be rubbish at the start of the season. No bones about it at all. Wanted to be completely straight. They said, don't worry, we've got some upgrades coming later on. And wow, when they got that Austria upgrade, they were saying, we think it's going to make a big difference, and it did. They had a fantastic midpoint to the season. In fact, Piastri's on a fast lap right now, Sam. It's going to be interesting to see where he ends up at the end of the session. As we say, coming into this weekend, Max Verstappen talking about them as a threat for pole position potentially. It doesn't look like it at the moment after his performance so far in this first hour. But the difference between those two teams, how the performance on track and the performance off track, remarkable.
Well, Alpine came into the start of this year wanting to cement fourth place and get closer to the top three, and they currently lie sixth in the Constructors' title with 2 podiums, and that alone is a failure in their achievement. So we know a lot of questions are being asked at Enstone right now, but it has meant McLaren have been able to basically overhaul them and pull away, as Piastri does finish that lap time and comes across in 6th place with Norris right in behind him. Piastri is second off, Norris 1.2, both on the soft compound tyre. Norris got a big upgrade once again for McLaren in Singapore, and now Piastri enjoys that same upgrade.
Norris is improving on his best lap time currently as he crosses the line and goes 3rd quickest.
Yeah, and that takes the checkered flag as well. Sainz also taking the checkered flag up in second, but those Ferraris setting those soft compound tyre laps earlier on along with Verstappen. So Norris then finishing that lap and managing to find the time. Piastri stays in 7th, Albon getting up into 8th too. But with the rain coming down right at the end, let's just have a quick check-in with Yuki Tsunoda. This is the sound of the Japanese racer.
It's so unnecessary, man, this guy.
And that is aimed at Logan Sargent's Williams. They were side by side coming into the left-hander of 130R. Tsunoda on the inside, Sargent around the outside. I think Tsunoda was hoping he would be able to skirt through and get in front of the Williams, but Sargent wasn't really having any of it, and that was Tsunoda's response. But at the end of free practice 1 then, it's Max Verstappen and Red Bull back at the top, a 1:31.647 ahead of the Ferrari of Carlos Sainz. The McLaren of Lando Norris is 3rd ahead of Charles Leclerc, and Yuki Tsunoda with a good headline time for the AlphaTauri, rounding out the top 5 ahead of Alonso, Piastri, Albon, Lawson and Stroll, the top 10. Perez, Gasly, Russell, Hülkenberg, Ocon, the top 15. Hamilton, Bottas, Magnussen, Sargent and Zhou, the 20 drivers at the end of FP1.
Thank you very much, Harry. Well, I did tell you to savour Singapore, didn't I? For a little bit of action and a new guy on top. But Max Verstappen doing what he does best. We were all wondering whether this technical directive had stopped Red Bull in their tracks, but it seems with that margin of just over 6/10, Max Verstappen is back where some would say he belongs, at the top spot. Can you see this being the trend of the weekend, guys?
Yes. I think he made that evidently clear pretty much from lap 1, did Max Verstappen. I think this technical directive wasn't the case for Singapore, and they're right back at it. And what was the gap at the end? 6/10 between Verstappen and Sainz, and this is the first track session of the weekend.
And it's Ferrari right up there with him, with Lando Norris nestled between Sainz and Charles Leclerc. So Mercedes not really in the hunt, or is this just FP1 and maybe they're looking at different things?
I think it's certainly looking at different things. I mean, it's FP1, so that's always the caveat, isn't it? Trying to actually gauge where the true performance indicators are. But I think they haven't shown us what they've got just yet.
Plenty more to come. Of course, the first practice session, as you might be able to hear the drivers making their sort of practice starts on the start-finish straight. We're just watching Lando Norris in that McLaren. He'll be feeling pumped up with that result from that session. Sam, things to watch out for in FP2 as they start to dial things in, and we've got quite a few upgrades on the cars this weekend, which is strange given it's a double header and we're on a flyaway, as we call it in Formula 1. But more work to be done. Do you think more development work in that second session?
I think so, absolutely. We also need to keep an eye out for the weather, Rosanna, because what if it does rain? That could throw a few surprises. We've seen Charles Leclerc on the new floor for Ferrari? Are they going to switch that over to Carlos Sainz now? What can he do on the new floor? And obviously a lot more learning and developing for not only cars but for drivers as well, as this circuit is a tricky one.
You're right. I think I'm up to raindrop 36 or so on me.
Are you counting them in your notebook, Rosanna?
Oh yeah. It's a page turn of my notebook, let me tell you. It's... and I'm just looking. So it was, yes, it was Max Verstappen ahead of Carlos Sainz and Lando Norris. So they just brought up the timing sheet in front of me, making sure we've got that all present and correct. But yes, a few more raindrops could just throw a little jeopardy into the mix. And we know it can rain here in Japan, don't we? We've all seen that over the years.
Well, we certainly have. I mean, I don't need reminding of last year.
You're still getting over it, aren't you?
I'm still, honestly, I saw a clip from the F1 social media of Verstappen in the cool-down room after the race last year. You know, have I won the championship? No, I haven't. Have I? Yes, and I didn't want to go back there. No, absolutely not. There isn't rain scheduled yet for Sunday, but as you say, it can change very quickly here in Suzuka.
Certainly can. Well, there you go. That is the first hour of practice done and dusted here at Suzuka Circuit in Japan, ahead of the Japanese Grand Prix on Sunday. Max Verstappen leading the way back to his top spot of the timesheets. We'll be back at 5 to 3. You can join us on Sports Extra. From Andrew Benson, Sam Bird, Harry Benjamin and myself, Rosanna Tennant, down in the pit lane. It's been a pleasure chatting to you through FP1. We'll be back for FP2. Hope you can join us. Goodbye.